The one story that hit me the hardest was before I actually started going out on my own and was shadowing the after-hours team. We got a call from a different state worker about a family who had moved into our state and needed to get a follow-up. This family had about 6 kids, and the barely 12-year-old girl in the family was a registered sex offender. Yeah, at 12. It was heartbreaking. It was a blended family, and the mom, who was the biological parent of the girl, believed the girl had been exposed to porn and sex by her biological dad. Anyways, one night, one of the kids said the girl's name had touched my penis. The parents, shocked of course, talked to each kid individually, where they all disclosed that she had indeed touched all of them. Not knowing how to handle it, they called Child Protective Services in their state for more help. Child Protective Services came out, called the cops, and for reasons that weren't clear to me, the child was placed on the registry by a judge. In my experience, usually they try inpatient and other therapies before going that route, but apparently the state judge did things differently. So when that family moved to our state, we had to go out and make sure that the family was following the adequate guidelines. For example, the girl was not allowed to be alone with her siblings. She couldn't swim in the pool at the same time as her siblings. She couldn't go to the same school or park or the same birthday parties because she was a sex offender. Her siblings couldn't even have friends over either. She was such a sweet kid. It really was such a bad situation. She told us she wanted to be a fashion designer and her favorite thing to do was play Xbox with her siblings. All the kids were in therapy and none of them appeared to harbor any ill will towards her. I think about this case a lot and I always wonder what happened to their family. I'm a neurosurgeon, not a CPS worker. The case was infantile rape. The true disgust, however, is when you consider the mechanics that resulted in such a degree of injury. The child is flexible, but weak. In the effort to rape her, both hips were grossly dislocated. The child's orifices are obviously too small for such penetration, so the vagina and anus were severely torn. The penis entered the rectum at least a few times, resulting in rectal tears and colonal perforation. The vagina and cervix were torn to shit as well, and the uterus was severely damaged. The baby, to deal with crying, had been hit against an object, resulting in multiple rib and spinal fractures, as well as a decompressed skull fracture. I've been a neurosurgeon for over 10 years now, and this was the only time I let out a tear and vomited violently. The infant, of course, did not survive. I did not have the heart to follow up on the perpetrator, for I feared my reaction if I were to learn that he got away or if I did not agree with the punishment. This case still fucks me up. I didn't work in Child Protective Services, but I did work very closely with them. I worked for a nonprofit emergency shelter for children who had been abandoned or neglected or abused. Mind you, I worked at the shelter 10 plus years ago, so the details might be a little bit fuzzy. So I get a call one night, I worked a graveyard shift, about a 2 male sibling group coming in. They had been found and picked up at Motel Drive. The oldest was 11 and the other one was 9. I start reading their case file and there's a long history of abuse and neglect. After being with us just for a few days, the 11-year-old is beginning to show signs of PTSD, hypervigilance, paranoia, aggressiveness, etc. He actually ended up pulling a knife on another one of the kids in the shelter because he came up behind him and grabbed him. Apparently, the mom, who was a heroin abuser, was prostituting the 11-year-old out to John so she could feed her money and heroin addiction. He would stay awake all night in the motel while she was out of it on heroin to make sure none of the Johns came back to hurt her or his younger brother. By the time the kid turned 12, he had been expelled from 3 different elementary schools and was banned from that particular school district. Eventually, Mom lost custody, and the last I heard is they were placed in foster care. I'm not a child protective services worker as well, but my mom was a foster parent and ran a daycare out of her house, so we've known the specifics and assisted on a number of cases throughout my childhood. One foster case was a child that was placed with us for about a week. He was a tiny little baby, and despite being in high school, I still woke up every morning to feed him. The mother was a teenage pregnancy who was abandoned by her parents for said pregnancy and simply didn't know how to take care of the baby. CPS was really understanding and gave her classes, and then when she learned how often a baby actually needed to be fed, she got her child back. She reached out to us and thanked us for everything, and we got regular updates. The child is 2 now, very happy and very loved. Another case where we called CPS, a mother brought her 4 kids to our daycare, her oldest son and 3 daughters. The oldest son was 7 years old and did most of the care for his younger siblings, ranging from 2 years old to 5 years old. The mother was pregnant, again, when she was obviously below the poverty line. When the baby was born, her kids got progressively more and more dirty to the point where Mom reached out in a Facebook group for clothing donations for the kids. They'd get dropped off, she would bathe them all and dress them all up again. My mother made excuses for that woman, which she says now is her biggest regret. She just kept saying, this is her 5th child and she's a single mom and a new baby. It's hard. Then we had to care for the baby, sickly, shitting blood. After 3 days with him, my mom called CPS. We were never told what happened with them, but I remember they came to pick up some things, and I remember looking out the front window and seeing them in the worker's car, all crying. It's hard, but, it's better for them in the end. I also am not a CPS worker, but I've worked in close partnership with them. In all these cases, the CPS workers were on my side, but their leadership was against us. They had far, far too many cases to be safe. I once witnessed a physical assault on a child. It was incredibly violent, and the parents could have easily broken the child's neck while I was watching and moving towards them. I dialed 911 and stepped between them, which I was later reprimanded for putting myself at risk, but if the parent was willing to do that in front of me, what were they doing when no one was around? The state did not move them into foster care because they were too old, and they claimed that the oldest kid could have watched out for the younger ones. Another case, I had an 11-year-old threaten suicide and refused to safely contract. We called crisis intervention, but they didn't come out because she never safely contracted. There wasn't a bed within 8 hours or so, and if they did take her in, they'd be responsible for her. I stayed with that client for, I think, about 14 hours. Another time I had a biological father return from prison after raping his daughter. They had the girls follow extensive safety procedures instead of telling the parent that he couldn't return. There was likely a return to the sexual abuse, but the state did not want to initiate a removal because she was old enough to learn to protect herself. Fucking bullshit. The last case I'll share with you is pretty disturbing. I had a client with birth defects because he and his mother were the product of incest. What ended up happening was that the grandfather raped his much younger sister. The mom was the result, and he ended up raping her, and my client was the result. He was following the pattern of sexually aggressive behavior and kept being returned from the facility where he was being treated, right back to the family where he was being abused. It was fucking absurd. As a side topic, if you're struggling with drug addiction and still think you're a good parent, you're dead wrong. That's your addiction fooling you. Get your kids into therapy and let them live somewhere else until you get yourself clean. Hey guys, it's Gote here. I want to thank you all very much for listening to this. It was rather graphic and kind of hard to get through, but that's what this channel is for, and that's what all this is for, so please appreciate it. If you have any suggestions for future videos, please comment and all that. I do apologize that I haven't been releasing videos over the last 2 days. It is finals week up here in college, but everything should be done by the end of this week, and I will be increasing my volume of videos that I will be putting on my channel for the foreseeable future, so stay tuned for that. If any of you have any personal stories you would like me to share, feel free to send me them via my personal email linked in the description below, and I'll include them in one of my videos. So again, thank you all for listening. and I will see you mates in the next episode.